mean, there's a toad in here, and there's frogs. No, it can't all be about you. This is a great story. Oh, hi. Sorry, everybody. Just having a little discussion. Welcome back to Carrie's Corner. We were just talking about today's book that we've been reading. This is day 7 of The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame, illustrated by Eric Kincaid. We are going to go ahead and begin where we left off yesterday, in the middle of Badger's taking Mole on a tour of Badger Hall. Okay, here we go.
"It would be astonishing indeed," said the Badger simply, "if I had done it. But as a matter of fact, I did none of it, only cleaned out the passages and rooms as far as I had need of them. There's lots more of it all round about. I see you don't understand, and I must explain it to you. Well, very long ago, on the spot where the wildwood now stands, before ever it had planted itself and grown up to what it is now, there was a city of people, you know. Here where we are standing, they lived and walked and talked and slept and carried on their business. Here they stabled their horses and feasted. From here they rode out to fight or drove out to trade. They were a powerful people and rich and great builders. They built to last, for they thought their city would last forever." "But what has become of them all?" asked the Mole. "Who can tell?" said the Badger. "People come, they stay for a while, they build and they go. It is their way. But we remain. There were badgers here, I've been told, long before that same city ever came to be, and now there are badgers here again. We keep on going, and we may move out for a time, but we wait and are patient, and back we come, and so it will ever be." "Well, and they went at last, those people?" "When they went," continued the Badger, "the strong winds and heavy rains took the matter in hand patiently, year after year. Perhaps we Badgers, too, in our small way, helped a little, who knows? It was all down, 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 gradually ruin and leveling and disappearance. Then it was all up, 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 gradually as seeds grew to saplings and saplings to forest trees, and bramble and fern came creeping in to help. In course of time, our home was ready for us again, and we moved in. Up above us on the surface, the same thing happened. Animals arrived, liked the look of the place, took up their quarters, settled down and spread. The wildwood is pretty well populated by now, with all the usual lot, good, bad, and indifferent. I name no names. It takes all sorts to make a world. But I fancy you know something about them yourself by this time." "Oh, I do indeed," said the Mole with a slight shiver. Well, well," said the Badger, patting him on the shoulder. "It was your first experience of them, you see. They're not so bad, really. We must all live and let live. But I'll pass the word around tomorrow, and I think you'll have no further trouble. Any friend of mine walks where he likes in this country, or I'll know the reason why." When they got back to the kitchen again, they found the Rat walking up and down, very restless. The underground atmosphere was getting on his nerves, and he seemed really to be afraid that the river would run away if he wasn't there to look after it. So he had his overcoat on and his pistols thrust in his belt again. "Come along, Mole," he said, as soon as he caught sight of them. "We must get off while it's daylight. Don't want to spend another night in the wildwood again." "It will be all right, my fine fellow," said the Otter. "I'm coming along with you, and I know every path blindfold. If there's a head that needs to be punched, you can rely upon me to punch it." "You really needn't fret, Ratty," added the Badger placidly. "My passages run further than you think, and I've bolt holes to the edge of the wood in several directions, though I don't care for everybody to know about them. When you really have to go, you shall leave by one of my shortcuts. Meanwhile, make yourself easy and sit down again." The Rat was nevertheless still eager to be off and attend to his river. So the Badger, taking up his lantern again, led the way along a damp and airless tunnel that wound and dipped for a weary distance that seemed to be miles. At last, daylight began to show itself through tangled growth, overhanging the mouth of the passage, and the Badger, bidding them a hasty goodbye, pushed them through the opening.
made everything look as natural as possible again with creepers, brushwood, and dead leaves, and retreated. They found themselves standing on the very edge of the wild wood. Rocks and brambles and tree roots behind them. In front, a great space of quiet fields, hemmed by lines of hedges black on the snow. And far ahead, a glint of the familiar old river, while the wintry sun hung red and low on the horizon. The otter, knowing all the past, took charge of the party, and they trailed out on a beeline for a distant stile. Looking back, they saw the whole mass of the wild wood, dense, menacing, compact, grimly set in vast white surroundings. Together they turned and made swiftly for home, for firelight, and for the voice, sounding cheerily outside their window, of the river that they knew and trusted in all its moods. There they are, finding their way out of the wild wood. There's also a picture of Ratty looking anxious. Chapter 5, Home Sweet Home. The sheep ran huddling together against the hurdles, blowing out thin nostrils and stamping with delicate forefeet, their heads thrown back and a light steam rising from the crowded sheep pen into the frosty air. As the two animals hastened by in high spirits with much chatter and laughter. They were returning across country after a long day outing with Otter, hunting and exploring on the wide uplands. The shades of the short winter day were closing in on them, and they'd still some distance to go. Plodding across the field, they had heard the sheep and had made for them, and now, leading from the sheep pen, they found a beaten track that made walking easier.
"It looks as if we're coming to a village,"
said the mole, slowing down as the track, that had in time become a path and then had developed into a lane, now handed them over to the charge of a well-metalled road. The animals did not hold with villages.
"Oh, never mind," said Rat. "At this season of the year, they're all safe indoors by this time, sitting round the fire, men, women, and children, dogs and cats and all. We shall sit through all right without any bother or unpleasantness, and we can have a look at them through their windows, if you like, and see what they're doing."
The rapid nightfall of mid-December had closed in on the little village as they approached it on soft feet over a first thin fall of powdery snow. Little was visible but squares of a dusky orange-red on either side of the street, where the firelight or lamplight of each cottage overflowed through the windows into the dark world outside. Most of the low windows had no blinds, and the lookers in from outside saw the inmates gathered round the tea table, absorbed in handiwork or talking and laughing. Moving from one window to another, the two spectators, so far from home themselves, had something of wistfulness in their eyes as they watched a cat being stroked, a sleepy child picked up and huddled off to bed, or a tired man stretch and knock out his pipe on the end of a smoldering log. Then a gust of bitter wind took them back of the neck. A small sting of frozen sleet on the skin woke them as from a dream, and they knew their toes to be cold and their legs tired, and their home distant a weary way. Once beyond the village, where the cottages ceased abruptly, on either side of the road they could smell through the darkness the friendly fields again, and they braced themselves for the last long stretch, the home stretch, the stretch that we know is bound to end sometime in the rattle of the door latch, the sudden firelight, and the sight of familiar things. They plodded along steadily and silently, each of them thinking his own thoughts. The mole's thoughts ran a good deal on supper, as it was pitch dark, and it was all a strange country to him as far as he knew. And he was following obediently behind the rat, leaving the guidance entirely to him. As for the rat, he was walking a little way ahead, as his habit was, his shoulders humped, his eyes fixed on the straight gray road in front of him, so he did not notice poor Mole when suddenly the call reached him and took him like an electric shock. There's the beginning of this new chapter. It was one of these mysterious fairy calls from out of the darkness that suddenly reached Mole, making him tingle through and through with its very familiar appeal, even while as yet he could not clearly remember what it was. He stopped dead in his tracks, his nose searching hither and thither in its efforts to recapture the current that had so strongly moved him. A moment, and he had caught it again, and with it this time came recollection in fullest flood. Home. That was what they meant. Those caressing appeals, those soft touches wafted through the air, those invisible little hands pulling and tugging, all one way. Why, it must be quite close by him at that moment, his old home that he had hurriedly forsaken and never sought again, that day when he first found the river, and now it was sending out its scouts and its messengers to capture him and bring him in. Since his escape on that bright morning, he had hardly given it a thought. So absorbed had he been in his new life and all its pleasures, its surprises, its fresh and captivating experiences. Now, with a rush of old memories, how clearly it stood up before him. In the darkness, shabby indeed and small and poorly furnished, and yet his. The home he had made for himself, the home he had been so happy to get back to after a day's work, and the home had been happy with him too, and was missing him, and wanted him back, and was telling him so, through his nose. The call was clear. The summons was plain. He must obey it instantly and go.
"Ratty," he called, full of joyful excitement. "Hold on, come back. I want you quick."
Oh, come along, Mole, do, replied the rat cheerfully, still plodding along.
"Please, stop, Ratty," pleaded the poor mole. "You don't understand. It's my home, my old home. I've just come across the smell of it, and it's close by here, really quite close, and I must go to it. I must. Oh, come back, Ratty. Please come back."
The rat was by this time very far ahead, too far to hear clearly what the mole was calling, too far to catch the sharp note of painful appeal in his voice, and he was much taken up with the weather, for he too could smell something suspiciously like approaching snow.
Mole, we mustn't stop now, really, he called back. We'll come for it tomorrow, whatever it is you found, but I daren't stop now. It's late and the snow coming on again. So, and I'm not sure of the way, and I want your nose, Mole, so come on quick, there's a good fellow. And the rat pressed forward on his way without waiting for an answer. Poor Mole stood alone in the road, his heart torn apart, and a big sob gathering somewhere low down inside him. But even under such a test as this, his loyalty of his friend stood firm. Never for a moment did he dream of abandoning him. Meanwhile, the wafts from his old home pleaded, whispered, implored, and finally claimed him. He dared not stay any longer within their magic circle. With a wrench that tore his very heartstrings, he set his face down the road and followed in the track of the rat, while faint, thin little smells, still dogging his retreating nose, reproached him for his new friendship and his cruel forgetfulness. With an effort, he caught up to the unsuspecting rat, who began chattering cheerfully about what they would do when they got back, and how fine a fire of logs in that parlor would be, and what a supper he meant to eat, never noticing his friend's silence and troubled state of mind. At last, however, when they had gone some considerable way further, and were passing some tree stumps at the edge of a copse that bordered the road, he stopped and said kindly, Look here, Mole, old chap, you seem dead tired. No talk left in you, and your feet dragging like lead. We'll sit down here for a minute and rest. The snow has held off so far, and the best part of our journey is over. The mole slumped on a tree stump and tried to control himself, for he felt it surely coming. The sob he had fought with so long refused to be beaten. Up and up, it forced its way up to the air, and then another, and others thick and fast, till poor Mole at last gave up the struggle and cried freely and helplessly and openly. Now that he knew it was all over and he had lost what he could hardly be said to have found. The rat, astonished and dismayed at the mole's grief, did not dare speak for a while. At last he said very quietly and sympathetically, What is it, old fellow? All right, here is the mole crying down in this bottom corner. Whatever can be the matter? Tell us your trouble. Let me see what I can do. Poor Mole found it difficult to get any words out between the heavings of his chest that followed one upon another so quickly, and held back speech and choked it as it came.
I know it's a shabby, dingy little place. It's a dingy place, he sobbed at last brokenly. Not like your cozy quarters, or Toad's beautiful hall, or Badger's great house. but it was my own little home and I was fond of it. And I went away and forgot all about it, and then I smelt it suddenly, and on the road when I called and you wouldn't listen, Matt. And everything came back to me with a rush, and I wanted it. Oh dear, oh dear. And when you wouldn't turn back, Ratty, I had to leave it, though I was smelling it all the time. I thought my heart would break. We might have just gone and had one look at it, Ratty, only one look. It was close by, but you wouldn't turn back. Ratty, you wouldn't turn back. Oh dear, oh dear.
The memory brought fresh waves of sorrow, and sobs again took full charge of him, preventing further speech. The rat stared straight in front of him, saying nothing, only patting Mole gently on the shoulder. After a time, he muttered gloomily, "I see it all now. What a pig I have been. A pig, that's me, just a pig, a plain pig." He waited till Mole's sobs became gradually less, till at last sniffs were frequent and sobs came only now and then. Then he rose from his seat and, remarking carelessly, "Well, now, we'd better get going on here, old chap," set off up the road again over the difficult way they had come.
"Wherever are you going to, Ratty?" cried the tearful Mole, looking up in alarm.
"We're going to find that old home of yours, old fellow," replied the rat pleasantly. "So you'd better come along, for it will take some finding, and we shall want your nose."
"Oh, come back, Ratty, do!" cried the Mole, getting up and hurrying after him. "It's no good, I tell you. It's too late and too dark, and the place is too far off, and the snow's coming, and I never meant to let you know I was feeling that way about it. It was all an accident and a mistake. And think of Riverbank and your supper."
There's the picture. A beautiful place to end today's reading of The Wind in the Willows. We will start tomorrow on the next page. And have a great day. Hope you do some reading and some fun. And I know you probably have some homework to do too. I hope you enjoy that as much as you can. So stay tuned tomorrow for the next installment of Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame, illustrated by Eric Kincaid. See you later. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.